All right, how's everybody doing today? Hotep. All right, let's get things started here. We're broadcasting on Facebook Live and our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, Imhotep. All right, and we're on. All right, everybody. Hey, this is Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network, host of the African History Network show. I'm a talk show host, researcher, lecturer, and writer. It is Wednesday, June 26, 2019, and we are live. So I wanted to come on and talk some about the online course that I'm teaching this evening, Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, June 26, 2019. This is an 8-week, 16-hour online course, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, What They Didn't Teach You in School. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, What They Didn't Teach You in School. Okay, so we're going to deal with thousands of years of history, and we deal with chronology of history leading up to the transatlantic slave trade, and we talk about how the transatlantic slave trade started and get a better understanding of it. All right, so everybody share this broadcast on your Facebook or YouTube channel. We're broadcasting on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network, and our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, Imhotep. So be sure to subscribe to both of those channels as well. All right. Now, the last time I taught this course live was September 2017. There have been a lot of archaeological discoveries since then, like the Clotilda slave ship, which was just discovered a couple of months ago, which came into Alabama in June of 1860. There have been archaeological discoveries, things like that. So this course is even more expanded than the last time I taught it. All right. So what I'm going to do is in the course, I do a PowerPoint presentation. We have about 50 references from articles. We have book references, video clips. So I'm going to give you a preview of what's going on, what's going to take place tonight. And then also you can register for the online course at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. And then also we'll post a link here on the thread of the broadcast as well, because I just updated the website. It's right on the homepage. The full course is $80. And it's archived. So we do the class live, and then you can go back and watch it over and over again. And you can ask questions during the class also with the live chat. All right. But we'll post the link here as well for you to register. And as soon as you register, you can start watching about 36 hours of bonus content that we have, including the previous time I did the full class. That's archived also from September 2017. Okay, so let me check this here. So we're broadcasting on our YouTube channel. How's everybody doing? I want to make sure everything's coming through clearly. And also our Facebook fan page, the African History Network as well. All right, so let me bring up this, let me bring up the PowerPoint presentation here. And we know that also because of the renewed interest in the reparations and more articles being written because of the HR 40 House Judiciary hearing. We have more people learning about the history of slavery and learning about the history of African Americans in this country as well. Okay. All right. So let me bring this up here, and we have to turn on the screen share. So give me just a minute. I'm broadcasting on Crowdcast and still trying to get used to that a little bit. All right, so let's turn on the screen share here. Okay, and this presentation came about because of a 4.5-hour lecture I did in 2014 called Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, What They Didn't Teach You in School. That lecture is about 7 years of research. Many people know I'm the host of the African History Network show on 9:10 a.m. Superstation in Detroit. So let's see. Okay, we've got this here. Let's bring this up. All right, so let's jump into this. All right. Okay, so you hear me talk some about the online study. No, you hear me talk some about the study from the Southern Poverty Law Center called Teaching Hard History American Slavery, Teaching Hard History American Slavery from the Southern Poverty Law Center. Let me bring this up here. From the Southern Poverty Law Center. We'll do a split screen. And this is one of the things I've incorporated into the online course. Last time I taught the course live, September 2017, this study didn't exist. But it's from the Southern Poverty Law Center. And it deals with how the history of slavery is being incorrectly taught in our schools, how oftentimes it traumatizes African-American students or students in general when we do the slavery enactments and mock slave auctions and reenactments of them picking cotton, things like this, right? So, and then it also gives recommendations on how to more correctly teach the history of slavery. So I first found out about this study from this article from theatlantic.com, theatlantic.com. All right. Atlantic's been around for over 100 years. A lot of people are rereading or finding out for the first time the fantastic 17-page article that Ta-Nehisi Coates wrote for theatlantic.com called The Case for Reparations. This is in 2014, The Case for Reparations. I know that a lot of people who are new to the reparations movement and think Ta-Nehisi Coates just popped up out of nowhere. No, you need to read this right here. I think this is when the article came out, I went and bought a copy of the Atlantic. Okay. So I think this is the only copy of the Atlantic I ever bought. I know it's the first copy I ever bought. And you can read this article online as well. Okay. So you saw him testify at the House Judiciary Subcommittee dealing with HR 40 and reparations. There's a reason why he was testifying, because he wrote this. He did the research to write this. Okay. So read that article also, and you can read it online. But what this article here is from theatlantic.com. Okay. And it's called What Kids Are Really Learning About Slavery. What Kids Are Really Learning About Slavery. A new report finds that the topic is mistaught and often sentimentalized, and students are alarmingly misinformed as a result. Okay. Now, when we look at this statue here, this is a statue of Abraham Lincoln and a benevolent freed slave. Okay. The name of this statue is called the Lincoln Emancipation Statue, and it was paid for by former enslaved people and erected in Washington, D.C. in 1876. So this is the year before Reconstruction ended. Okay. 1876. And let me post a link here also on YouTube. Just a second. So this is the year before Reconstruction ended, which ended in 1877 with the Compromise of 1877. This is how Republican Rutherford B. Hayes became president. Okay. So this statue has come under criticism. All right. The statue has been criticized for representing the history of slavery from a paternalistic perspective. So this was a picture from the article from the Atlantic magazine, theatlantic.com. Name of this article, What Kids Are Really Learning About Slavery. So this came out February 1st, 2018, first day of African American History Month. And this was the first article I saw about this study. And I read numerous articles dealing with the study from the Southern Poverty Law Center. I went to their website and I downloaded the study, took it to a printer, got it printed up, and I read it. And it's a 52-page study. It's very, very well done. And one of the things they did in this study, you've heard me talk about this some before, is they did so the name of the study is called Teaching Hard History of American Slavery, right? And they did a survey of 1,000 high school seniors, okay? And one of the things they found is that only 8% of high school seniors surveyed knew that slavery was the central reason why the Civil War was fought. Only 8% of high school seniors surveyed knew that slavery was the central reason why the Civil War was fought. Now we're talking about high school seniors of all different races and ethnicities. 68% did not know it took a constitutional amendment to formally end slavery. Okay, 68% did not know this, which means only 32% knew that it took a constitutional amendment, the 13th Amendment, to formally end slavery. And then 35% thought it was the Emancipation Proclamation that ended slavery, which it was not. Emancipation Proclamation did not free the enslaved Africans. Okay. And if you actually go to loc.gov, Library of Congress website, and read it, or archives.gov, you'll see that. Okay. And the enslaved Africans in the border states like Maryland, Kentucky, Missouri, and Delaware, they were still slaves. All right. And then I'll be doing another broadcast, and we'll probably talk about it some in the class, how in April 16th, 1862, President Abraham Lincoln signed the bill to pay reparations to slaveholders in Washington, D.C. This is during the Civil War, to pay reparations to slaveholders, not to enslaved Africans, but to the slaveholders in Washington, D.C. Okay, so this is some very, very deep history, and we have to understand this history chronologically. All right, so what happens when you have high school students that don't really understand the history of slavery? Okay, this has wide-ranging consequences. And just very briefly here, here's some of the ways that the history of slavery is incorrectly taught in our schools. We teach about slavery without context, preferring to present the good news before the bad. So they'll talk about Harriet Tubman, they'll talk about abolitionists, things like this, but won't talk about how slavery formed in the British colonies, why it formed, deal with slavery in England, okay, but also the history of the Africans known as the Moors, who go into the Iberian Peninsula in 711 AD and take the teachings from ancient Kemet into Europe and bring Europe out of the Dark Ages, is going to lead to the transatlantic slave trade happening. This is something that I deal with in the online course. All right. But even these things here that I'm outlining are not properly taught in schools across the country. We tend to subscribe to a progressive view of American history that can acknowledge flaws only to the extent that they have been addressed and solved. All right. And then, because of the hearing that took place Wednesday, June 19th, we see backlash from the right wing. Right. So we see Rush Limbaugh, conservative talk show host who has somewhere between 16 million to 20 million listeners, talking about, whites in America did more to end slavery than any other race. Really? After 246 years? I mean, what are you talking about? We're talking about the exploitation of at least 262 skills, trades, and crafts that African people had in this country from 1619 to 1865. This is one of the things we deal with, because many people think that African American, enslaved Africans just cooked the food for the master and picked cotton. No, there were at least 262 skills, trades, and crafts that we had in this country from 1619 to 1865. And these skills, trades, and crafts are going to create untold wealth for this country. It wasn't just picking cotton, even though cotton was huge, cotton was king. Okay. But we're talking about slave owners being able to loan out their slaves to corporations to work for them. We're talking about also slave owners on the plantation taking out insurance policies on enslaved Africans on the plantation who did very dangerous work. They may have worked in sawmills. They may have worked in coal mines. There's a whole history behind insurance policies being taken out, not on slave ships. That did happen, not on the enslaved African cargo on slave ships. That did happen. I'm talking about insurance policies under insurance policies sold by insurance companies on enslaved Africans on the plantation. That's a conversation that a lot of people don't even want to have because they don't know that it took place. Okay, so this is a very, very deep history. Okay, so we teach about the American enslavement of Africans as an exclusively Southern institution. Okay, even though all 13 colonies own slaves. All right. Now, it is true by the drafting of the U.S. Constitution in 1787. It is true that 5 states had outlawed slavery by then. Massachusetts was the first one in 1783. But you have this debate come up at the Philadelphia Convention in 1787, trying to determine whether or not to outlaw slavery. Okay. And this is why Article 1, Section 9 of the U.S. Constitution was written. This is why I tell people all this stuff goes back to the U.S. Constitution. Sanctioning slavery, foundation for the fugitive slave laws. That's the Article 4, Section 2. Okay, the creation of the Electoral College. Okay, which gave slaveholding states more representation in the House of Representatives, is based upon population. This encouraged slavery amongst Southern slaveholding states. Okay, all this ties back to the U.S. Constitution. This is why I tell people we have to understand history. And we have to understand law. We must read and understand the U.S. Constitution. 4, we rarely connect slavery to the ideology that grew up to sustain and protect it, which is white supremacy. Understanding white supremacy and racism being a system of advantage and privilege distributed based upon race. Okay, coming out of the ideology of white supremacy. Now, when we talk about this white supremacy and racism, this is not hate speech. I know social media platforms have new standards fighting against hate speech. I understand that this is not hate speech. We're dealing with history. Okay, so we have to understand the difference. Let's continue. 5, we often rely on pedagogy poorly suited to the topic. When we ask teachers in the study, when we ask teachers to tell us about their favorite lesson when teaching about slavery, dozens proudly reported classroom simulations, which is wrong. And you've seen some of my videos and talked about this on my radio show, the African History Network show, every Sunday, 9 p.m. and 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on 9:10 a.m. Superstation, unless they have me preempted by a hockey game or Major League Baseball. Okay, that's a whole nother conversation. Simulation of traumatic experiences is not shown to be effective as a learning strategy and can harm vulnerable children. All right. And what this does is what's happening now in schools across the country is the way the history of slavery is being taught and the history of civil rights. I just did a video dealing with this about a month or so ago. It traumatizes African-American students specifically, but it can also traumatize students in general. There was one example given where you had a reenactment of the Central High School in Arkansas. Okay, Central High 9, and it was a reenactment of them integrating that school. So they had one African-American child in the classroom and his classmates were hurling insults at him. Now, they weren't allowed to curse and use racial slurs. OK, but this devastated him. OK, and this was determined by the state's attorney general office in New York. OK, Letitia James, I think his name is Letitia James. So we see these stories week after week, month after month, of slave lessons gone wrong in schools right now. I'm not talking about in 1987, 1977, 1967. I'm talking about 2019, 2018, 2019. We see these stories. If these teachers had read this study here, Teaching Hard History of American Slavery, it tells you in the study, don't do the slave reenactments. Don't do the civil rights reenactments of African Americans being yelled at and called all types of derogatory names. OK, so, once again, I don't understand how I know about this study and the teachers with the PhDs and master's degrees in education don't know about this. I don't. And the ones with the teaching certificates, I don't understand this. You can download this study from Southern Poverty Law Center, splcenter.org, splcenter.org. OK. All right, everybody, share this broadcast on your Facebook page. Invite your friends to tune in. Also, African-American business owners, you can post the name of your business here on the thread of the broadcast, and we'll let you know how you can advertise with the African History Network as well. Email us at customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com, customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com. All right, also, if you took this online course in the past, you can email us at customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com, and we'll enroll you at 50% off. OK, if you took this course anytime in the past, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school, we'll enroll you at a 50% off discount. Keep in mind, you can watch this online course as many times as you want to. All the sessions are recorded once we do it live, and you can watch from around the world as well. OK. All right, so let's continue here. And I'm going to go through, I'm just giving you an intro right now. We're going to go through some of the things that we cover in the course. We do it thousands of years of history also in the course. We have people watching on our YouTube channel as well. How's everybody doing? Let's see, we have Ronald, Michael Smith. We have Brandon, and who's this? Anson Moore. Just a few of the people watching. Okay. If you need me to post a link again so you can register for the online course, let me know. We'll post that also. All right. And let's see, I'm trying to share this broadcast as well. So just bear with me here for a minute. All right. Still getting used to new technology a little bit here. Okay, because we're doing crowdcast. All right. Okay, let's continue here. All right. Okay, so we often rely on pedagogy poorly suited to the topic when we ask teachers to tell us about their favorite lesson. When teaching about slavery, dozens proudly reported classroom simulation of traumatic experiences is not known to be effective as a learning strategy and can harm vulnerable children. 6, we rarely connect slavery to the ideology that grew up to sustain and protect it, which is white supremacy. Okay, understanding white supremacy and slavery. So these are themes that these are all themes that we deal with in the online course. Okay, that we make sure that we cover and show the connection between in the online course, because this is extremely important. And one of the things that I like that Dr. Julian Malveaux did when she testified, she's an African-American female economist, and Ta-Nehisi Coates did also, is they tied the legacy of slavery directly into the conditions of African-Americans today. This is what has to be done. So when we teach this history, we have to do the same thing. Okay, we have to understand that historical events don't happen in a vacuum. They are the culmination of the results of a sequence of historical events that lead up to a larger event taking place. All right. So unfortunately, a lot of times when the transatlantic slave trade is talked about, they want to start in the mid 15th century. Okay, they want to start in the 1440s, or they may start in the early 1500s or something like that. No, you have to deal with thousands of years of history before that, but specifically, you need to deal with hundreds of years of history of the Africans known as the Moors in Europe, because this is going to lead to the transatlantic slave trade happening. We tend to center on the white experience when we teach about slavery. It's recommended to read slave narratives, and this is extremely important. More slave narratives have come out because of Zora Neale Hurston's book, Barracoon, dealing with the last slave ship that came into the U.S., the last known slave ship that came into the U.S., which was the Clotilda in 1860. And she has, in that book, she has interviews with Cudjoe Lewis, but also Redoshi. So there was an African slave woman named Redoshi who was renamed Sarah Smith, I think was her name. She was renamed. And Redoshi lived 2 years longer than Cudjoe Lewis. So Cudjoe Lewis was believed to be the last known survivor, the oldest known survivor, or last known survivor of the Clotilda slave ship. He died in 1935, but we just found out recently Redoshi died in 1937. Okay, so as we progress year after year, as more research is done, as more things are uncovered, we're getting more evidence. We're also gaining a better understanding of this, especially from the slave narratives. One of the things we'll do within the online course is some research that just came out, just published early this year, from Professor Stephanie Jones Rogers of University of California, Berkeley. And she has a new book out, and I've talked about this as well, but she has a new book out called They Were Her Property. They Were Her Property. And this book deals with how between 1850 to 1860, about 40% of slave owners in this country were white women. Okay, from 1850 to 1860, looking at Census Bureau data, looking at slave narratives, looking at a number of different sources from 1850 to 1860, 40%, approximately 40% of slave owners in this country were white women. Well, this contradicts the narratives that were being pushed in the 1970s and 1980s about slave ownership. So as time goes on, as more research is done, as we dig more into the slave narratives, as we dig into the archives, as more archaeological discoveries are made, right? This information comes out. I'm looking at discoveries coming out and archaeological discoveries as well. I'm looking at discoveries coming out every month. Okay, so this is, and it's fascinating also because this ties directly into our mindset, into our conditions today. This is why this history is so important. You know, people's history and culture teaches them how to deal with the problems of the past in the present and the future to meet the needs of the community. Okay, people's history and culture teaches them how to deal with the problems of the past in the present and the future to meet the needs of the community. But also what you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you have been taught about yourself. What you've been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. Okay, so this is why this history is so important. Okay, so we have Gigi Ya from Philadelphia. How's everybody doing? Christy is on also. Let's see, that's on Facebook. So we're broadcasting on our Facebook fan page, the African History Network. We got Latasha on YouTube. Michael Imhotep, IMHOTEP on YouTube. We've got Crown Christ, Ronald, Brandon, Christopher, just a few of the people on our YouTube channel. Okay. All right. So let's continue. So those just tuning in, I'm giving you a preview of our online course that we'll be doing tonight, Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, June 26, 2019. It's an 8-week, 16-hour online course, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. You can register for it at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Okay. As soon as you register, there's about 36 hours of bonus content that you can watch also. We'll post a link here on our on the thread on YouTube as well. Okay, so let's continue here. Let's go back to the PowerPoint presentation. Okay. So there have been some studies, there have been a number of studies that show why studying our history, why teaching our history to our children, why our children learning their history is so important, how it impacts their self-esteem, their self-development, their self-worth, their academic performance as well. Okay, I'm just going to look at a couple of them right here. So this was an article. Well, first of all, this was a study done by Professor Sharita Butler Barnes at Washington University in St. Louis. Okay, and this was an article picked up by theroot.com. Theroot.com. New studies find that positive feelings about Blackness improve academic performance for Black girls. New studies find that positive feelings about Blackness improve academic performance for Black girls. All right. And in the article, it says, believing that Black is beautiful, an important mantra of self-acceptance and self-love, could pay major dividends in school, a new study finds. An article in the Journal of Blacks, of Blacks in Higher Education focuses on a new study from Professor Sharita Butler Barnes, a professor at Washington University in St. Louis, which finds that young Black women with strong racial identity are more likely to be academically engaged, curious, and persistent. Okay. Young Black women with strong racial identity, not strong identity to Cardi B, not strong identity to Nicki Minaj, not attacking them, but no, we have to understand also the propaganda of the media. Young Black women with strong racial identity are more likely to be academically engaged, curious, and persistent. So the survey looked at 733 African-American middle and high school girls in 3 socioeconomically school districts in the Midwest, according to the Journal of Blacks in Higher Education. Now, the name of the study is called Promoting Resilience Among African-American Girls, Racial Identity as a Protective Factor. Promoting Resilience Among African-American Girls, Racial Identity as a Protective Factor. And it was published on the Child Development Journal website. So what I encourage African American parents to do when you're trying to get these when you're trying to get African American history classes incorporated in your child's school or taught in your child's school, you have to go in with the actual studies that document this. Okay, there are numerous studies that document this. Okay, document the importance of our children learning their history, and also go in with this study here from the Southern Poverty Law Center, Teaching Hard History of American Slavery, because the school board, the teachers, the PhDs, they're expecting you to go in with feelings and emotions, not facts and evidence. When you go on with facts and evidence, you're going to catch them off guard. They're not really going to know how to deal with you. Okay, when you go on with the studies from the educational journals, some of the professionals haven't read these studies. I'm telling you, some of the professionals have not read these studies. When you go in with these studies, you're gonna catch them off guard, and you'll be able to make your argument based upon facts and evidence. All right. Okay, so name of the study: Promoting Resilience Among African American Girls, Racial Identity as a Protective Factor. And it was published on the Child Development Journal website, and it found that feeling positive about being Black, along with feeling supported by their schools, correlated with the girls' greater academic motivation. Well, we know that when our children are taught their history, it has and I'm talking about history beyond slavery. I'm not just talking about we were slaves and worked from sun up to sundown and we were beaten and things like. I'm not talking about that. The history of slavery is part of our overall history. But when we talk about the success of African Americans, when we talk about the civilizations that we built, when we talk about African people circumnavigating the globe, okay, this has a positive impact on the self-esteem, the self-development, how our children perceive themselves. Okay, so this is extremely important. Researchers found that feeling good about your racial identity could act as a buffer for students in hostile or negative academic environments, but it can also act as a buffer. I would take this a step further. It would also act as a buffer, not just in academic environments, but environments they live in as well, i.e. United States of America under Donald Trump. Because once again, what you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. So your history and culture gives you your foundation. It gives you your VIPs, your values, your interests, and your principles, as Dr. Leonard Jeffries and Professor James Small, two of my teachers, talk about. Okay, and you've heard my interviews with them. You hear them talk about this. Your values, your interests, and your principles, your VIPs, influence your economic empowerment. They influence your political empowerment. Okay, when we look at economics, and Dr. Claude Anderson is one of my teachers. You've heard me interview him. Last time I interviewed him was January 13th, 2019 on the African History Network show. And we re-aired we broadcasted that interview here on our Facebook page and on YouTube as well. When we look at the fact that we've gone from 1.9 million African-American owned businesses in 2007 to about 4 million in 2019, 2.4 million are owned by African-American women, right? The number of African-American owned businesses is double, but the revenue has been, or the average revenue has been cut in half. And still 95% of our businesses only have one employee. What has not kept up with the massive growth in the number of businesses is the percentage of our disposable dollars that we're spending with African-American owned businesses. This is why I caution people, because people say, well, we need more businesses. We need more businesses. I said, well, wait a second, hold on. We only spending between 2 to 3% with the businesses we have now. If we just have more businesses and that foundation of history and culture is not in place, which gives us our values, our interests, and our principles, then we'll have 3-4 million businesses still fighting over the same 2 or 3% of our disposable income. That's what's happening. This is what I'm trying to explain to people. And I had this conversation with Dr. Claude Anderson, because he talks about his 5-story building. And, he talks about how the foundation is economics. I said, Doc, no, the foundation is not economics. The foundation is your history and culture. Because if we start with economics as the foundation, we're operating largely based upon white business principles. And that doesn't work for African people. We're not operating based upon cooperative economics. We're operating largely based upon white business principles. And we're dealing with a people who largely have been taught to hate themselves. So the foundation has to be African history and culture, because every other ethnic group in America, for the most part, have their history and culture intact, and they use it to fight for scarce wealth, power, and resources. And their foundation is their history and culture, which gives them a cultural paradigm that they see reality through, and it influences their business, it influences their economics, it influences the type of businesses they have and the way the businesses are structured. It influences where they spend their money. So if you're dealing with a people who've largely been taught to hate themselves, then, you know, they're going to have a hard time spending money with people who look like them. So this is why we have to, I'll argue there's 6 stories to that building, but this is why the history and culture is so important. Okay, we have to understand we are a psychologically damaged people, and and that has to be addressed. We have to deal with this. Okay, and I'm somebody who has a degree in business administration with a major in marketing. I understand this, and we were taught white business principles at Wayne State University's business school. Now Wayne State University is in Detroit. Detroit at that time was like 90% African American. We were taught white business principles. This is how I understand it. At the same time, I was studying African history and African American history, and I'm reading Dr. Jawanza Kunjufu, and I'm reading Dr. Claude Anderson. We're talking about back in the 90s, okay, early 90s. So and then since then, I've read and I've interviewed Dr. Jessica Gordon Nimhard, who wrote the book Collective Courage. Where's that book? I got it somewhere here in this stack of books. Collective Courage. And Collective Courage deals with a history of African Americans and entrepreneurship based upon co-ops, based upon cooperative economics. Book is here somewhere. Okay, it's in, I got like 3 stacks of books here, so it's in one of these stacks. I don't know, but okay, this is somewhere here. I can't find it. All right, but check that out. Dr. Jessica Gordon Nimhard, Collective Courage. And if you go to our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, you can listen to the interview I did with her. I think it's like 2014, 2016, something like that. I interviewed the sister. Okay. All right, so let's continue here. How's everybody doing? We got Otis, Gigi, Terry, African American business owners. Hey, post the name of the business of your business here on the thread of the broadcast. Email us at customerservice@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We'll let you know how you can advertise with the African History Network. Also, current promotion is get 2 months for the price of 1. Get 2 months for the price of 1. We have some new advertisers. We have the ProfitRoom.com. The ProfitRoom.com. They can help you learn more about the stock market, options, futures, foreign exchanges. They teach you how to do this, and they also specialize in day trading and one-on-one mentorship. Visit their website, theprofitroom.com/wealth building, theprofitroom.com/wealth building. And you may have seen the article that blacknews.com did on them back in 2018. And they have a new class starting up soon that deals with all these topics. So check them out, theprofitroom.com/wealth building. All right, let's continue. Okay, so we have this study here. And this article is from theroot.com. Let's see. Let's go to let me turn the screen share back on. All right. I'm navigating through 2 browsers, Google Chrome and Firefox, and I'm navigating through different technologies. So you got to bear with me. Okay. Now, researchers also found that feeling good about your racial identity could act as a buffer for students in hostile or negative academic environments. Persons of color who have unhealthy racial identity beliefs tend to perform lower in school and have more symptoms of depression, Professor Sharita Butler Barnes noted. Quote, we found that feeling positive about being Black and feeling support and belonging at school may be especially important for African American girls, classroom engagement and curiosity. Feeling connected to the school may also work together with racial identity attitudes to improve academic outcomes. All right. So this is an article from January 10th, 2018. New studies find that positive feelings about Blackness improve academic performance for Black girls. This is from theroot.com. All right. Now, this study here, let me back up. Check out this article. And there were a number of articles written about this study. This is from blackamericaweb.com, June 14th, 2012. Now, I've been studying the effects of media for 27 years. I've been studying media for 27 years, the impact, the effects of media, things like this, right? TV kills Black boys' self-esteem. TV kills Black boys' self-esteem. So this was an article from blackamericaweb.com, but a number of news outlets carried this, talked about this study. CNN.com had an article about this as well. A new, precise, and exhaustive year-long study finds that watching television regularly distorts and ultimately destroys the self-esteem of young black males, who often find themselves comparing one another to the characters they view on air, leaving them feeling trapped and as if there are, quote, very few positive life paths they can aspire to, end quote, unless they choose to be a rapper or a ball player or an entertainer or something like that, right? Okay, and then this study here, number of news outlets had articles about this. AfricanGlobe.net had an article January 1st, 2013. Entitled Black Teens with Racial Pride Do Better in School. Black teens with racial pride do better in school. Now, this study is very important because this was a joint study by the University of Pittsburgh and Harvard University. University of Pittsburgh and Harvard University. And what you're going to find is you have a lot of white universities that have done research on the positive impact that African history and African American history and cultural events, things like this, have on African American children. So with that being the case, you'd have to wonder, well, why isn't African American history mandatory in schools across the country? If they've done the studies, why isn't it mandatory? They know this information. African American teenagers perform better academically when their parents instill in them a sense of racial pride. Really. A new study by the University of Pittsburgh and Harvard University shows that when parents use racial socialization, such as talking to their children or engaging in activities that promote feelings of racial pride, of racial knowledge, pride, and connection, it offsets racial discrimination's potentially negative impact on students' academic development. Well, wait a second. You mean to tell me that it can benefit our children academically to learn their history and culture? When we look at this, when parents use racial socialization, such as talking to their children or engaging in activities that promote feelings of racial knowledge, pride, and connection, taking them to African American History Month celebrations, taking them to the African American Museum, taking them to Malcolm X Day, Dr. King Day, okay, taking them to Kwanzaa celebrations, all these things positively impact the self-esteem, the self-development, the self-worth of our children. So you have to ask the question, well, why isn't it mandatory that this is taught in schools? Because this is all part of American history as well. And if we actually want to tell the truth, we understand, if you read Dr. David Imhotep's book, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence, and this is one of the books, we use in the online course, just for reference. You don't have to buy any of these books to be able to follow along in the course. We know that African people were in this land we call the United States of America long before Native Americans came into existence, if we actually want to deal with the history, if we actually want to deal with the facts and the evidence and the archaeological evidence. Okay, so this book came out in 2011. Has 713 footnotes thoroughly documenting an African presence in this country going back at least 51,700 years ago. I've interviewed Dr. David Imhotep many times. Okay, you can listen to the podcast, audio podcast of those interviews. Go to AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Okay. But we get into this information in the online course. This is why we have to deal with this stuff chronologically. Okay. And then if we look at the back of the book, he has a group of Native Americans called the Algonquins. The Algonquins on the back of the book. Okay. This book is out of print. His new book should be out this month, July 2019. I talked to him about a month and a half ago, and he said his new book was coming out July 2019, and it's entitled "The First Americans Were Africans Revisited," and it has like 200 additional pages. It has a lot more research. It's phenomenal. But just very quickly here, on the back of his book, it says cowboys and Indians, cowboys, and it has the word Indians crossed out and Africans after it with a question mark. Not hardly. The cowboys and Indians came on the scene far too late. The first Americans even came before the Native Americans, far before any other group, at least 56,000 years ago. This particular statement is backed by 8 peer-reviewed articles. We will study evidence exposed by a panel of credible scholars, professors, and researchers. The evidence is in several different scientific fields. Many pictures, maps, charts, and summation lists are included. Do not forget the Egyptians or the ancient Kemites. They were also here far before the Indians or Columbus. They left structures above and below the waves in far away places in North and South America, from the east to the west coast, from the valleys to the mountaintops that still carry their names. You will read about remnants of their artifacts, writings, architecture, farming, and more. For years, this story was hidden and forbidden to be repeated. Researchers who dared to bring out new finds against the accepted history were intimidated, funding terminated, and in some cases, their careers put in jeopardy. Dr. David Imhotep is now throwing caution to the wind and lifting the veil of secrecy, never to be closed again. This is a true history for all to learn and enjoy, and there is much more on its way. Okay, as the veil of secrecy and concealed information is made available to the public in the Lifting of the Veil series. Okay, so the question we have to ask ourselves, right? The question we have to ask ourselves is, and we'll come to some of your questions or comments here in just a minute. And I'm monitoring this on Facebook and YouTube. What happens to the psyche of our children and African Americans in general, adults also? Because I speak in different cities and our people don't understand this history. I was just speaking in Atlanta at the 3-day Juneteenth festival. It takes place in Atlanta that Bob Johnson organizes. And I did 2 presentations there. You know, our people don't understand. We don't understand our history. What happens when our children realize, and our people in general will realize, that this was our land stolen from us? And even though August 20th, 1619 did happen, even though the transatlantic slave trade did happen, I'm not saying it did not happen. I'm saying we have to understand the chronology of history. Okay. And even though it did happen, African people have been in this land we call the United States of America going back tens of thousands of years. What happens when African people, African Americans, realize this was our land stolen from us and we're not guests in this land, that we were here before Native Americans existed? You understand the paradigm shift that will happen to us mentally? This is the reason why this type of information is being suppressed. Okay, so we have the studies to document the importance of teaching our history to our children, especially in schools. And when we study somebody like Dr. Carter G. Woodson, who co-founded the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History, September 9th, 1915 in Chicago, and he created Negro History Week in 1926, which became Black History Month in 1976, and is now African American History Month. He talked about how the history of African Americans needed to be taught in every school across the country. He understood this. He was an educator. He said the history of African Americans needed to be taught in every school across the country. All right. So we have those historians and educators in our history who understood this. All right. Just a second here. trying to monitor this on the second computer, and this freezing up on me. All right, let's continue. How's everybody doing? All right, okay, so we have Lupita Nyong'o. She was named a few years ago most beautiful person in America. All right. Okay, so we talked some about the film Black Panther, which is a deep movie on multiple levels. So here's some of the things we deal with. And Black Panther connects directly to African history and culture. I do lectures on Black Panther. I teach our children about the film and how it relates to African history and culture. So our children, it really resonates and connects with our children. So let me get into some of the things we cover in the online course. Let me look at some of your questions here. Okay. Corey, I think you've been saying this for years. This is our land. Corey said, okay, Terry, it's our history. We know it. We need to know it. Okay, we have Toya. All right, let me post this information here. You can register for the online course. We start tonight, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll do 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. And all the sessions are archived. Okay, this is session number 2. You can go back and watch session number 1 as soon as you register. You can watch from around the world. We have about 36 hours of bonus content also, okay, that you can watch as soon as you register as well. And we'll post this on our, and also visit AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We have it right on the homepage as well. You can register there also, okay? And we'll post this link on YouTube as well. All right, just a second here. All right, so let's continue here. And then on YouTube, we have, let's see, Ronald. We have, Jerome Khoisan. Yeah, the Khoisan. Khoisan come from Southern Africa. They're the ancestors to the Ainu and the Twa. They go all around the world. They spoke in the Click language, okay? In the class, I show you an interview that Dr. David Imhotep did on WKRP in Cincinnati, Channel 5. The Khoisan spoke the oldest language, which was the Click language. When we look at the language spoken in the film Black Panther, the name of the language spoken in the film Black Panther is called isiXhosa. isiXhosa is a Bantu language. It's spoken, one of the countries it's spoken in is in South Africa, okay? And isiXhosa has the click sounds incorporated into the language as well, okay? All this is interrelated, interconnected. So when and the way I teach about the film Black Panthers, the way is different than a lot of other people because of the type of research I did on it. All right, this is a deep movie on multiple levels. I mean, just like the word Wakanda. Wakanda is a real word, even though Wakanda is a fictitious place. Wakanda is a real word. Wakanda, we see that in the Sioux Indian Native American language. You see it in the Omaha Ponca language. Wakanda means possesses secret powers, which sounds a lot like black girl magic. Wakanda means possesses secret powers, but Wakanda is also a Bantu word as well. Bantu is a group of about 500 languages spoken. We see it spoken in South Africa. We see them going into East Africa and Kenya. We see them going west into like Cameroon. Bantu is a group of 500 African languages. It's a family. Kiswahili is a Bantu language. isiXhosa is a Bantu language. So when we look at the word Kwanzaa, the word Kwanzaa is a Bantu word. So this is very, very deep. But here's some of the things that we deal with in the online course, right? We deal with what was the transatlantic slave trade? What were some of the events that led up to the transatlantic slave trade starting? What role did Christopher Columbus play? Columbus, even though he did not start the transatlantic slave trade, we see it starting with the Portuguese right about 1440. Columbus is crucial to the transatlantic slave trade spreading, okay? Because of his 4 voyages starting August 3rd, 1492, when he set sail on the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. So Columbus is crucial to the transatlantic slave trade spreading. When did Africans first come to the U.S. as slaves? So this year, August 20th, 1619. A lot of people are talking about this. We heard this talked about during the hearings for HR 40. Okay, and when I was in Atlanta for the Black Homeschooling Conference, I'll be back in Atlanta June 19th through the 21st for the Liberated Minds Black Homeschooling Education Expo. Okay, so those in Atlanta, look out for that. Go to liberatedmindsexpo.com. All right. But when I was in Atlanta for the Juneteenth celebration, okay, we had a lot of people talking about August 20, 1619. Well, that did happen, Jamestown, Virginia, those 29 Africans coming into Port Comfort on the White Line slave ship, even though slave statutes and slave laws did not exist in the 13 colonies in 1619. That's a whole nother story that a lot of people don't understand. The first colony to have slave laws was Massachusetts in 1641. So even though all that did happen, the Spanish were taking Africans into the territory we call South Carolina in the 1520s as slaves. This is about 100 years before Jamestown, Virginia. That's not talked about. This is why you have to understand the chronology of history. So even though a lot of times we talk about the British colonies, we can't just look at the British colonies, because the Spanish had enslaved Africans in this land. Also, the Dutch did as well. This is how you get the colony of New York, which was a Dutch colony called New Amsterdam. So we have to understand the chronology of this history. So when did Africans first come to the U.S. as slaves or enslaved Africans? Did Africans sell themselves into slavery? We'll deal with this complicated history, because oftentimes it's not the way that is promoted in it. The way it actually happened is not the way oftentimes it's taught. Oftentimes it's taught in a manner to absolve responsibility from Europeans or the U.S. government to pay reparations. So they say, oh, you sold yourself into slavery. Okay. Well, they say, well, so the way that actually happened, and this is one of the criticisms of Dr. Henry Louis Skip the Truth Gates. And I've read a lot of Gates articles. You know, he does some good research, but Gates is an apologist for Europeans. This was the whole reason why he wrote the essay for the article for the op-ed article for the New York Times in February 2010 called "Ending the Slavery Blame Game," and he tries to make the argument that Africans and Europeans were equally culpable for the transatlantic slave trade. Okay, but Dr. Leonard Jeffries and Dr. Malefikete Asante had to check him. That's historically inaccurate. But he's an apologist for Europeans. Okay, he does do some good work. You know, I read his article. I've read dozens of his articles. Here's his book. That's the companion to the. Here's his book. That's the companion to the 6-part series, "The African Americans: Many Rivers to Cross." That's on PBS. All right. A lot of people don't know he put out a book that's a companion to that. This is a good book, a lot of good information. Now, it doesn't deal with the history of the Moors in here. It doesn't deal with the African presence in this country going back at least 51,700 years. It doesn't deal with none of that. But still, I mean, there's some good information in this book. You know, I use that book to teach from, but it's limited. It's limited. All right. So let's continue here. Okay, so we deal with what role did Christopher Columbus play? Because Columbus is crucial, not just to understand the transatlantic slave trade, but the connection between Columbus and the Moors also. Were African people in America before the slave trade? Yes, we were. This was our land stolen from us, even before Native Americans came into existence. Okay, so more and more cities are having Indigenous Peoples Day. We need to be there for Indigenous Peoples Day. Because yes, the transatlantic slave trade did happen. I'm not saying it didn't, but African people were in this land before Native Americans came into existence. This is something that Dr. David Imhotep talks about in The First Americans Were Africans, documented evidence. All right. We deal with the 800-year occupation of Europe by the Africans known as the Moors, which is crucial. Okay. And you know, when I was taking Africana studies classes over 20 years ago at Wayne State University, and even African history classes, the history of the Moors was not talked about really. Okay. Now, when I took my, I had to take a Shakespeare class during the summer, because I went to summer school also year round. One summer, to fulfill a requirement, I had to take a Shakespeare class. So we studied 7 of Shakespeare's plays. All right. One of them was Othello. And, you know, Othello is about a Moor, an African man who's a Moor. So it was the term Moor came up, but it wasn't really talked about who the Moors were. And then also one summer, and it may have been the same summer, I can't remember, I had to take a medieval history class to fulfill a history requirement. right? I took a medieval history class. In the medieval history class, there is very little history about the Moors. And back then, I knew a little bit about the Moors. Now I know a whole lot more. But even back then, I'm looking and I'm like, well, how you just skip over all this history? So it's, I mean, is deep how this history just left out of the narrative that's being told. So we look at the 800-year occupation of Europe by the Africans known as the Moors, who go into the Iberian Peninsula, today known as Spain and Portugal, in 711 AD. And the teachers they take into Europe bring Europe out of the Dark Ages. One of the things they take into Europe is they call it alchemy. Today we call it chemistry. They introduced the periodic tables. We do a shocking archaeological discoveries that are causing experts to rethink everything. And these discoveries are coming out basically every month. All right. These discoveries are coming out basically every month. And when these archaeological discoveries come out, they're causing scientists and archaeologists and paleontologists to say, they have to rethink everything. This causes them to push the timelines back. There was one discovered in Morocco in June of 2017 of remains of Homo sapiens, modern man, that dates back between 300,000 and 350,000 years ago. Now, the oldest remains they had prior to that date back about 195,000 years ago, and they were found in Ethiopia. So this is causing them to totally rethink everything, and they said they have to rethink the migration of Africans out of the Nile Valley region and realize it took place much earlier than they thought. This is causing, I'm going to show you some archaeological discoveries that blowing people's minds, blowing all the archaeologists' minds. So what happens is, the deeper they dig, the blacker the planet gets. The more research they do, the older we get. This is what happens. So this is why this history has to be taught chronologically. Okay. And you see my shirt right here. People wonder who that is. That's Lupita Nyong'o as Nakia in the film Black Panther. Okay. She was one of the Dora Milaje. Right? Dora Milaje means adored ones. Dora Milaje were patterned after the Ahosi or the Mino or the female Dahomean warriors, okay, who were in Dahomey, modern day Benin. All right, so we'll deal with shocking archaeological discoveries that are causing experts to rethink everything. We'll deal with how insurance companies that took out insurance policies on not just slave ships, but enslaved Africans on plantations as well. That's a whole deep history in itself. We'll deal with Freemasonry in America and the founding fathers, origins of the term America and Africa, because contrary to popular belief, Africa was not named after Publius Cornelius Scipio Africanus, a Roman general from the 3rd century. No, that's not. No, the term Africanus in Latin means belonging to Africa. He took his surname after the name of the area that he conquered. It wasn't named after him. It's totally backwards. I don't know where people got that from. It's just totally backwards. We deal with the problem with slave movies and why we're being bombarded with slave movies and a slave themed TV show. A lot of people like the TV show Underground. I didn't. I wasn't a fan of it because I understand the history. I'm like, why you just keep wanting to show us in slavery, trying to fight to be a human being? Why you have a TV show dealing with this? You don't have a TV show dealing with ancient Kemet. You don't have a TV show dealing with Ghana, Sangha, Mali. You don't have a TV show dealing with Ta-Nehisi, ancient Nubia. Why do you like having movies and TV shows of African people in bondage fighting to be treated like human beings? So we dig deep into this, the problem with slave movies. We deal with Osar, Aset, and Heru, who the Greeks called Osiris, Isis, and Horus, and the origins. Now, this may go outside the circumference of some people's awareness. Just because you never heard it before, disagree with it, or don't like it, does not mean it's not true. It just means you have to do some research to understand what I'm talking about. Osar, Aset, and Heru, who the Greeks called Osiris, Isis, and Horus, and the origins of the Immaculate Conception story. Okay, when we look at the Notre Dame Cathedral, which was built around 13th century AD, 12th or 13th century AD, Notre Dame means Our Lady. It's in reference to the Virgin Mary. Okay. But when you understand the history of the Notre Dame Cathedral, it was built on the remains of two temples. One of those temples was dedicated to Isis. Isis is who the Greeks called, the Greeks called Set, Isis. And these were, and in the mythology, this was an African woman who gives birth to the baby Heru, who the Greeks call Horus. When we have the Black Madonna and Child, which was worshipped all throughout Europe, okay, the Black Madonna and Child comes from Set and Heru, Isis and Horus. There's still statues today all throughout Europe of the Black Madonna and Child. A lot of us don't notice. They're in Spain, they're in France, they're all throughout Europe. Okay, because Europeans used to worship the African woman. So this is why we have to understand the chronology of history. And then when you have a rise, I'm trying to find this book here by this book right here by Runoko Rashidi. So this book right here by Runoko Rashidi, this is one of the books we reference in the course. Black Star, the African Presence in Early Europe. Black Star, the African Presence in Early Europe. Visit his website, drranoko.com, RUNOKO, drranoko.com. So this deals with some of the history of the Moors in Europe. And I interviewed him back in about 2012, 2011 about this book, and I read it. And in his book, you know, he has pictures. This is page 90 of his book. A lot of you have heard some of the interviews I've done with Runoko. These are pictures he took. These are pictures of the Black Madonna and Child throughout Europe. Okay. This is something I talk about in the class and presentations I've done. This is the national flag of Sardinia, which is an island, and it has the African Moors heads on it. It's an Italian island, and it has 4 African Moors heads on there. Why are those Moors heads, Dylan? Why are they there? This is Italy. There were no black people in Italy. What's all that about? But we see the statue of the Black Madonna Child in Switzerland, Poland. Let's see, Madrid, Spain, and Luxembourg also. All throughout Europe, they were worshiping the African woman. What happened? Coat of arms of Pope Benedict XVI with the head of a Moorish king. Right here. See, there's a deep history. It's in Europe with the Africans, Moors, and the Europeans. This is how all this stuff gets switched around. And when we understand the transatlantic slave trade, when we understand what happened with the Moors in Europe, and we understand the chronology of history, you see that the transatlantic slave trade was really Europeans getting revenge on the Africans for what happened in Europe. And one of the things that happened is that Africans were intermixing with Europeans and changing the complexion of Europeans in different European countries, especially Spain and Portugal. We see it in Spain and Portugal. We see it in Italy. We see it in Sicily. It happens in England, but to a lesser extent in England. We see it in Austria and Germany, but because England, Germany, and Austria are further away from where the Moors are going in Morocco into what's known today as Spain and Portugal, is to a lesser extent, but we see it there. We see it with Queen Charlotte Sophia, who was the wife of King George III. Who was King George III? King George III was the king that the 13 colonies were fighting from and separating against. His wife was of African ancestry on her mother's side. Her mother was of African Moorish ancestry. So Meghan Markle was not the first one. Meghan Markle is not even a queen. She's the Duchess of Sussex. She's not even the first one. Okay, so check out his website, drranoko.com, RUNOKO. You can, or I think you could order his books there, or you can find out how to order his books there. Runoko is bad. You got to check out his stuff. He's written a number of books. This is just one of them. Okay, and then since this book is right here, here's another one from Runoko Rashidi, African star over Asia, the black presence in the East. African star over Asia, the black presence in the East. All right. So Runoko has written a number of books. I just talked to him, and he's a world traveler. He's traveled to, last time I checked, is about 120 countries and islands all around the world. So he takes photographs documenting the African presence there. So he has a personal collection somewhere between, I guess, 35,000 to 40,000 photographs as well. All right. So check out Runoko Rashidi, Rashidi. All right, let's go back to the PowerPoint and let me see who does. Let's see who we have here. Arlene. Okay, so on YouTube we have Arlene, we have Ronald. Arlene said they have the Black Madonna and Child here in the U.S. and Massachusetts. One of my relatives have seen it. Really, send me a picture of that if you can get a picture. Email me at info at africanhistorynetwork.com. Info at africanhistorynetwork.com. If you want to see a picture of that. Okay. Is it, I mean, yeah, I want to see where it is. Okay. The statue of the Black Madonna and Child. Christopher said Europe was mostly black until recently. So says Ben Frank. The people claiming to be Europe just got there a few hundred years ago. So there's the book of the Blacks in Britain, Briton, the Blacks in Britain, I think it's called. But what are you referencing, Christopher? And then when you said, yeah, so Europe was mostly black until recently. What is your point of reference for that? Okay, we have Ronald. Birth name is AST. Yeah, AST. Offset. There were no vowels in the metal letter. So AST, you'll see it spelled, or offset is tricky. There are no vowels in the metal letter. Offset means she of throne. She of throne. Throne. Okay, Ronald, only 55 years of slavery teaching and effects. Okay. I'm just looking at some of your comments. Jerome said the Moors are purposely left out. One author thought they were Arabs. Now they're Arabs going in with the Moors. The term Arab is a tricky term. We know the original Arabs were Africans. The Arabs are also going to refer to the Moors as Berbers, which complicates things. And this is something that's talked about in this book here, Golden Age of the Moor, edited by Dr. Ivan Van Sertima. Okay. Golden Age of the Moor, edited by Dr. Ivan Van Sertima. And this book is out of print last time I checked, but see if you can get it online. See if you can get it from Dr. Ivan Van Sertima's company. His wife runs his company because he's an ancestor now. And let me see here. Transaction Publishers is the one who put this book out, but see if you can get it, because when you try to get it online, Journal of African Civilizations. Try them, Journal of African Civilizations. Because when you try to get it online on Amazon, a lot of places on Amazon, they're charging $300, $400 for the book. Okay. I think from his company, his wife is charging $30, $40, something like that. Okay. But it's a fantastic book. Golden Age of the Moor, and it deals with the Moors in Europe, and it has essays from some of our top scholars on the history of the Moors. So this is one of the books that I use as reference in the course also. Dr. Jose Pimenta Bay has an essay in here. Dr. Wayne Chandler, Runoko Rashidi, Dr. John G. Jackson, okay? Just some of Jan Carew, just some of the few of the scholars that have essays in this book. This is a very, very deep book. Golden Age of the Moor. Okay, let's continue. And this is edited by Dr. Ivan Van Sertima. Let's go back to the PowerPoint. And if you need me to post a link for the online course so you can register again, let me know. Let's see, who's already registered for the online course. First of all, how you all like this type of information? Let me know how you all like this type of information. Okay, Dawn, Corey, just a few of the people watching on Facebook. Okay, let's go back to the PowerPoint. And then if you need me to post a link so you can register for the online course, let me know. And we will be meeting 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Okay. All right, so we deal with the problem with slave movies, why we are being bombarded with slave movies and a slave themed TV show, the link to ancient Kemet, Egypt, and Christianity. Okay, we'll deal with all of that because I've been teaching this so long. I understand the need to teach this chronologically. And Professor Kaba Hiawatha Kamene, formerly known as Booker T. Coleman, he's one of my teachers. You've heard numerous interviews I've done with them. We're in documentaries together also. The Black Friday documentaries from director Rick Mathis. We're in Elementary Genocide Part 3 from director Raheem Shabazz. And Professor Kaba talks about how to understand the existence of something, you must first understand the pre-existence of existence. To understand the existence of something, you must first understand the pre-existence of existence. So you have to teach this chronologically. In the two main ways to teach the transatlantic slave trade, you can teach it episodically as an episode in history, like it just fell out of the sky like rain and grew up out of the ground like flowers. And that's not what happened. Or you can teach it chronologically. So I was taught to teach it chronologically. Okay. And you can see the difference because when you have somebody like Dr. Henry Louis Gates Jr., and, you know, Dr. Leonard Jeffries calls him Dr. Henry Louis Skip the Truth Gates, because oftentimes he skips over the truth. But Gates teaches it episodically as an episode in history. When you teach it episodically, you lose a lot of the significance and you lose a lot of the context. And when you actually understand the chronology of history, you see the transatlantic slave trade is a continuation of the wars and the conflicts between the African Moors and Europeans in Europe. The transatlantic slave trade is really Europeans getting revenge on African people and on the Moors. That's what it really is. Okay, this is why the history of the Moors are purposely left out. Because then if you understand that, then you can better understand what's going on and what's going on today. So it's purposely taught episodically, right? So we don't make that connection. Okay, we do a Freemasonry in America and the fake Willie Lynch letter 1712, because Willie Lynch never historically existed. I hate to burst people's bubbles, but Willie Lynch never historically existed, all right? So here's Renoko. Renoko has a saying that I've modified and made my own. You hear me say it all the time, especially at the beginning, the intro of my radio show. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you have been taught about yourself. What you've been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. Okay. He's in Hidden Colors too. All right. Let me fast forward through some of this here. So when we look at Dr. David Imhotep, and the first Americans were Africans, documented evidence, right? The truth has to be erased so that the lie can be believed. The truth has to be erased so the lie can be believed, right? If we look at page 14 of his book, deals with a discovery made in Allendale County, South Carolina in 2004 by Dr. Albert Goodyear, okay? Dr. Albert Goodyear is an archaeologist at the University of South Carolina. And he's a white archaeologist, okay? But he's one who tells the truth. In 2004, there was a discovery made, and they found 13 different pieces of evidence to document an African presence in this country that we call the United States of America, going back at least 51,700 years ago, all right? They found artifacts, architecture, campsites, carvings, Egyptian writings, footprints in lava, genetic M174D haploid groups dealing with DNA and genetics, linguistics, paintings, skulls, skeletons, structures, and tools. They found 13 different disciplines fairly documenting an African presence in this country going back at least 51,700 years ago. This is before Native Americans came into existence, okay? So, but the problem is that this type of information is not being taught. All right. And then also there's new evidence coming out of South America showing an African presence going back at least 100,000 years ago. Okay. We talked about that in last week's class. We'll talk about that again tonight as well. So these archaeological discoveries are coming out every month and it's blowing the minds of the scientists and the archaeologists. It's caused them to have to rethink everything. Now, here's a picture of Dr. Albert Goodyear. And there's another discovery that he was consulted about, he was asked about. That was the discovery of evidence of humans in California dating back 130,000 years ago. We talk about that in the course also. But this is an article from ScienceDaily.com. ScienceDaily.com is a scientific website. They talk about scientific studies. This is an article from November 18th, 2004. Entitled New Evidence Puts Man in North America 50,000 years ago. New evidence puts man in North America 50,000 years ago. Now they don't tell you who these men were or women. They don't tell you who these humans were, but we can figure it out. Here is a summary of what the study in the article says. Now, this is not my summary. This is the summary from ScienceDaily.com. It says radiocarbon tests of carbonized plant remains where artifacts were unearthed last May along the Savannah River in Allendale County by University of South Carolina archaeologist Dr. Albert Goodyear indicate that the sediments containing these artifacts are at least 50,000 years old, meaning that humans inhabited North America long before the last ice age. Now, that's not me saying this. This is what ScienceDaily.com is summarizing from the study and the article. So this evidence is there. It's just being suppressed. Okay. So we deal with a number of different archaeological discoveries. We talk about the Druids, the Europeans known as the Druids who were in Ireland, and they're dealing with a watered down teaching, watered down version of teachings coming out of ancient Kemet and ancient Egypt. And the word Druid means he who knows in Old Irish. And they were dealing with what was called the gnosis, the true knowledge. And the teachings of the Druids were conflicting with the Eastern Orthodox Christian Church. Because at this time, we're looking at 5th century AD, 4th century, 5th century AD. At this time, the Catholic Church does not exist. I know when we talk about this history retrospectively, and we talk about the First Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, and we talk about the Council of Ephesus in 431 AD, and people talk about the Catholic Church. Historically speaking, the Catholic Church doesn't even exist at this period of time. The Catholic Church comes into existence in 11th century AD when it splits from the Eastern Orthodox Church about 1050, 1052 AD. Catholic Church does not exist at this time. So when we look at the Druids, right, we're seeing they're dealing with a watered down version of teachings coming from ancient Kemet, ancient Egypt that our ancestors were practicing, and these teachings conflicted with the Christian Church, the Eastern Orthodox Church. All right, and another book we use in the course is Tony Browder's book, Egypt on the Potomac by Tony Browder. All right, so I'm just skimming the surface with this. I'm just giving you a preview of some of the things we deal with in the online course. So I saw this meme a few years ago, and it dealt with African Americans celebrating St. Patrick's Day. And most of us participate in holidays. We don't even understand why the hell we're participating in these holidays. Okay, we don't understand what we're participating in. So you have St. Patrick's Day, right? And when we deal with Patrick, right, we're honoring a man who killed thousands of Druids in Ireland. But I saw this meme, and it's appropriate, and it says, "I hope for the day I see Black folks this prideful about their own history, fixing our own problems and unifying for a Black agenda." And what happens is we participate in holidays we don't understand the origin of. And I've studied the origin of all the holidays. Okay, this is why I don't celebrate them. Okay, St. Patrick's Day, Valentine's Day, Christmas, Thanksgiving. All right, now, Mother's Day and Father's Day, I participate in that. I celebrate that. But all these holidays, the 4th of July, all this stuff, I've studied the history of it. And I encourage people to read the books by Dr. Ishaka Musa Barashango. The books by Dr. Ishaka Musa Barashango, who's an ancestor now, African People and European Holidays and Mental Genocide. Okay. And I have the book here somewhere. We use that in the course also. It's in the stack. Where the hell is it? Let me see, man. It's deep in the stack. I can't get to it, I don't think. But African People and European Holidays and Mental Genocide by Dr. Shaka Musa Barashango. Read those books, Volume 1 and Volume 2. And he deals with the origins of all these holidays that we celebrate. We've been taught to celebrate. Okay. And I asked the question. You see me post this on my Facebook pages. Around the time of St. Patrick's Day, March 17th. March 17th was the day Patrick died, March 17th, 462 AD. If you wear green on St. Patrick's Day, will you wear red, black, and green on African Liberation Day, which is May 25th? If you wear green on St. Patrick's Day, will you wear red, black, and green on African Liberation Day? If not, why not? Okay. So this is extremely important. And this goes back to your thoughts create feelings, your feelings create actions and behaviors, your actions and behaviors create results, right? And how your history and culture gives you your foundation and gives you your VIPs, your values, your interests, and your principles, and it influences your thoughts, your behaviors, and your actions. Okay, let's continue here. Let's see here. Modern science destroys where ancient science support life builds. Okay, Ronald said they are pagan holidays. Arlene said. Now, pagan comes from the Latin word paganus. Okay, and pagan in its truest sense just means something that is practiced by indigenous people or something practiced by rural people, rural, rural people. Okay, pagan in its original sense, in its truest form, does not mean something negative. Okay, so we deal with archaeological discoveries like the lost city of Egypt, Tanis Heracleon, which was swallowed to the sea about 1,200 years ago. These are some of the discoveries that were made in that archaeological find. Let me try to get past some of this here. Okay, that's Dr. John Henry Clark, who taught us all history is a current event. Everything that ever happened continues to happen in some shape, form, or fashion. Okay, so we deal with the 800-year occupation of Europe by the Africans known as the Moors. Now, we look at this land, and we know the founding fathers referred to as Egypt of the West, because 50 of the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence were Freemasons. Okay, and this is something that is not talked about a lot. But if we look at the Washington Monument, which is called, is 555 feet tall, and it's called an obelisk, but it's an African symbol, originally called a Tekken, T-E-K-H-E-N, a Tekken. There were about 1,200 Tekkenu, for plural, about 1,200 Tekkenu all throughout ancient Kemet or Egypt. Kemet meaning land of the blacks, one of the original names for Egypt. You also see Ta Mary meaning the beloved land. Okay, Ta Mary meaning the beloved land. All right, so if we look at Freemasonry, right, and the connection between Freemasonry and the teachings coming out of ancient Kemet and the mystery systems or the lodges in ancient Kemet, the word Mason is derived from the Latin words mass and sun. Okay, and Mason means child of light and expresses the desire to pursue light, which is a metaphor for the sun, which symbolizes knowledge. So historically, you would see, and even today in cartoons, right, or in children's books, light was a metaphor for knowledge. So when we look at the Moors taking the teachings from ancient Kemet, they're taking the light from the Nile Valley region of Africa into the dark continent, because Europe was in the dark ages. Africa was not in the dark ages. Europe was in the dark ages. Europe is cast into the Dark Ages basically in 476 AD, 5th century, when the Vandals and the Visigoths, these two groups of barbarians, crushed the western portion of the Roman Empire. Okay, and they send Europe into what is known as the Dark Ages, a period of time of ignorance, a lack of knowledge, a lack of scientific inventions, etc. And it's going to be the teachings from the Africans known as the Moors that bring Europe out of these dark ages. And then the next age, so they're coming out of the dark ages, late 1400s, going into the early 1500s. That next age is called the Renaissance age, the age of enlightenment, Light, light, in association with knowledge. So historically, we see that light or the sun is associated with knowledge. If we look at cartoons, we'll see that the cartoon character, whether it's Doc McStuffins or Mickey Mouse or Tom and Jerry, if they get a bright idea, right? A good idea, a bright idea, you see a light bulb go off over their head. It could be Woody Woodpecker, Chilly Willy, any of them. Okay, we see this depicted. So the term child of light or sons and daughters of light, because we did not discriminate. We taught African women also. The term child of light or sons and daughters of light was first used to identify students who had completed 42 years of study in the temples of ancient Kemet. Many Masonic temples were modeled after the temples of Kemet, places where light or knowledge was imparted in a series of steps or degrees. Okay, so when we look at George G.M. James' book, Stolen Legacy, okay, Greek philosophy is stolen Egyptian philosophy, Stolen Legacy by George G.M. James. He talks about the seven liberal arts. He talks about the trivium and the quadrivium, the 3 and the 4, the 7 liberal arts taught in ancient Kemet, in the lodges. And this is where the concept of liberal arts comes from. You have the rhetoric, you have the logic, the arithmetic, things like this. And then when we look at you getting your credentials in a series of steps or degrees, okay? Well, this is what we see in the in colleges and universities: associate's degree, bachelor's degree, master's degree, PhD, etc. All right, this is where this is coming from. When we look at Freemasonry, we look at the highest level in Freemasonry is the 33-degree Mason, right? But in ancient Kemet, they're dealing with 360 degrees of knowledge. So when you understand that Europeans learned less than 10% of what ancient Africans knew, then 10% of 360 is 36. They learn less than 10%, which is why the highest level in Freemasonry is 33 degrees. They learn less than 10% of what the ancient Africans knew. Look at pages 18 and 32 of Egypt on the Potomac by Tony Browder. Tony Browder is a bad brother. Egypt on the Potomac. Now, this is another book we use in the course. And once again, you don't have to buy any of these books to be able to follow along in the course. I use them as reference. Okay. If you want to build a library in your home, which we should have for our children, because we have entertainment centers in our homes. We have the flat screen TVs. We have a Wii and a PlayStation and all this stuff, right? We have Blu-ray, DVD players, surround sound systems. But where's the Timbuktu in where's the University of San Corre in our homes? Where are the books? It's good to have the online resources, but what happens when the internet goes down? We have to have the libraries in our home. We have to have the books in our home. We have to have the almanacs. We have to have the globes. All of this in our homes to be able to teach our children and teach our families. So Egypt on the Potomac by Tony Browder deals with how the whole layout of Washington, D.C. is based upon ancient African principles coming out of ancient Kemet, ancient Egypt. And it deals with how the layout of Washington, D.C. is a copy of ancient Egypt. And in Washington, D.C., Tony Browder does a tour of D.C. called Egypt on the Potomac. And he shows you the evidence of how the layout of Washington, D.C. is a copy of ancient Egypt. And we know the layout of Washington, D.C. was done by Benjamin Banneker. Benjamin Banneker had a photographic memory. He was a genius, but also he was a descendant of the Dogon. We know the Dogon are in Mali and Burkina Faso. This group of ancient Africans, tribe or nation of ancient Africans. We know they originally come from ancient Kemet, and they have a superior knowledge of astronomy. So they knew about the Sirius A and Sirius B star systems. long before European astronomers knew about it. And then when you look at, and we know that Sirius A is in the constellation called Canis Major, the big dog, Sirius. And Sirius was referred to, this is why Sirius is referred to as the dog star. So when you look at the satellite radio station, Sirius, now it's XM and Sirius, now they combined. But one of their logos for Sirius was a dog with a star over his head. Sirius, the dog star. So all this ties into our history, culture, astronomy, all of this. This is all connected. All right, let's continue here. So this is just a preview of what we deal with in the 8-week, 16-hour online course. How you all like this type of information? Okay. Who's registered for the course? If you're not registered, let me know if you need me to post the link again so you can register. As soon as you register, you can start. We have about 36 hours of bonus content, and you can watch the first week. You can watch session 1 that we did last week. Okay. And we're jumping into this 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So you don't want to miss this. Okay, who we have here? Let's see. Just a second. All right, let's look on Facebook. We've got Gigi, Montero, James. Okay, let's post the link again. Y'all can register. And also is at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. If you took this online course in the past, email us at customerservice@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, and we'll enroll you at 50% off if you took this online course in the past. Now, I can go in to our online school and see, I could verify that you registered for the course in the past also, okay? We'll post the link again here on YouTube. All right, and this is just a preview of some of the things that we deal with. Your children, this is friendly to children also. I don't do cursing. It's not vulgar. You know, of course, we deal with some of the history of slavery, but it's appropriate for, you know, teenagers, even 12, 13-year-olds. I don't do all this cursing and things like this. Okay, so it's, you know, it's appropriate for children as well. And it's visual also. Okay, let's continue here. An online course is $80 in this archive. You can go back and watch it over and over again as well. All right, so this is, okay, so 50 of the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence were Freemasons. So even when I teach about the Declaration of Independence and things like this, I deal with it from a different perspective. Because we're dealing with them, they're dealing with ancient principles coming out of ancient Kemet, and they're bringing those principles here to this land that they call the United States of America. But we had already been here for at least 51,700 years. And there's an African presence of ancient Kemet, ancient Egypt here in this land also. There were pyramid mounds that we built up and down the Mississippi River. There were about 1 million mounds in this land. Today, there are only about 100,000 left. One of the biggest ones that's still left is called Cahokia in East Illinois. So we see these ancient principles coming to this land also. So 50 of the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence were Freemasons. 13 of the 39 signers of the U.S. Constitution were Freemasons. We understand the U.S. Constitution is the basis of law in this land. In Article 6 of the U.S. Constitution tells you that the U.S. Constitution and all the previous treaties and all the subsequent treaties are the supreme law of the land. So this is why you hear me talking about the U.S. Constitution. If we're going to fight for reparations, we need to understand law and history. Okay, so this book right here, the Declaration of Independence and Other Great Documents of American History, 1775 to 1865. I got this book was about 94 something. Well, when I don't know. I forgot when I got this book, but it was $2 when I got it. Okay, I'm sure inflation has hit. This is published by Dover Books. Get something like this. You can read it the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution at loc.gov, which is the Library of Congress website, loc.gov or archives.com. But it's good to have it in book form, okay? Because I travel, wherever I go, I take this with me. This is very, very important history, important information. Okay, so read page 18 of Egypt on the Potomac, also by Tony Browder. So here is Alsar, Alset, and Heru, who the Greeks called Osiris, Isis, and Horus. So we deal with this some in the class. Also very important. And we see the cultural appropriation of Alset from the 1970s TV show from DC Comics that was on CBS called The Secrets of Isis. And, Saturday mornings in the 1970s, I would get up Saturday morning and I would watch the Shazam and Isis hour on CBS. And they had Shazam, the superhero Shazam. But then that was a half-hour show. And then Isis had her half-hour show. And they showed us this white woman. And they said in the show she got her powers from ancient Egypt. And her name was Isis. But they didn't tell us she was a copy of an African woman from the mythology. Okay. So this is the box cover from the complete series, the DVD box set, the complete series, The Secrets of Isis. And they used to have episodes of this on the streaming service Hulu. Okay. I don't know if they still have them. A few years ago they did. And when I watched it, in the beginning of the show, they talked about how she got her powers from ancient Egypt, and they named some of the names of the Neteru from ancient Kemet, ancient Egypt, like Hathor. I'm like, whoa, this is deep. This is just, cultural appropriation. But I remember when the show was on, I don't remember any mass protests of us saying, hold on, you stealing that from us. So from Alset and Heru born of an immaculate conception of virgin birth on December 25th. This may go outside the circumference of some people's awareness just because you never heard it before, disagree with it, or don't like it. Does not mean it's not true. It just means you have to do some research to understand what I'm talking about, like read Christianity Before Christ by Dr. John G. Jackson, or The World's 16 Crucified Saviors by Percy Graves. Then we get the Black Madonna and child worship all throughout Europe. And then from the Black Madonna and child, when we see the rise of European powers coming out of the 15th century, going into the 16th century, right? We see the rise of European phenotypes. We see the rise in European culture, European phenotypes, etc. Okay. And then we see the decolorized version. We see Michelangelo painting the Sistine Chapel using his family, his relatives as the model for Adam and Eve. And we see God depicted as a European. So we see as Europeans are extracting wealth out of the countries that they're conquering through the transatlantic slave trade. They are rebuilding Europe, because Europe, as Dr. John Henry Clark teaches us, was land poor, people poor, and resource poor. Europe was hit hard by the Black Death, the bubonic plague, which hit in 1347. It hit in spurts from 1347 to 1400. Europe loses somewhere between 1/4 to 1/3 of the population, somewhere between 25 million to 75 million people. And they're conquering people's lands. They go into Haiti and what we call Haiti and Puerto Rico and Honduras and Jamaica. And they're setting up plantations, and they are growing crops, and they're extracting the mineral wealth out of these lands, extracting the gold and silver, and they're using this to rebuild Europe. And one of the things that Columbus was looking for in his 4 voyages was another source of sugar, because the Moors had gotten a lot of Europeans hooked on sugar. So we deal with why Christmas is celebrated on December 25th. That's a really, really deep conversation. We deal with some history in that. We had Dr. Francis Cress Wilson and Nellie Fuller, who taught us, if you do not understand European white supremacy and racism, what it is and how it works, everything else you think you understand will totally confuse you. Dr. Francis Cress Wilson wrote the ISIS papers, Keys to the Colors. She's an ancestor now. So Dr. Leonard Jeffries and Professor James Small, when they teach, they talk about the pyramid principle. And they usually show a pyramid like this. And I since they're 2 of my teachers, I incorporate this into my teachings as well. So here's the pyramid of Khafre. at Giza, Pyramid of Khafre at Giza. You see the Harem Market or the Sphinx in front of it. So it's our history and culture that gives us our VIPs, our values, our interests, and our principles. Our values, our interests, and our principles. This is what African history and culture does. And it influences our economic empowerment and our political empowerment. Okay. So it does not matter how much money we have. If this foundation is not in place, we won't know what to do with the money. So our GDP, our gross domestic product, is about $1.3 trillion a year. And about 97% of our dollars are spent with people that don't look like us, because that foundation is not in place. Okay. And we have to leverage our economics to enforce our politics also. So all three are important. It's not just economic empowerment. Economic empowerment with a colonized European mind, all you're going to do is just, you'll have businesses, but you're just going to get the money right back. And we have to understand politics as the legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources. The legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources, and the writing of laws, statutes, ordinances, amendments, and treaties, their adoption, interpretation, and enforcement. Voting is one aspect of politics. Voting is extremely important. But when you vote, you have to vote based upon issues that impact you. The issues that impact you is based upon your understanding of history. So when we, and one of the things I talk about now is, I'm on the Black Agenda Tour, hitting some of the cities with Jice Johnson, Amici X, and David Banner. Visit the blackagendaontour.com, the blackagendaontour.com. I'll be in Chicago Saturday, July 13th. Okay, visit the website because they're nailing down the location. That's 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. And one of the things I've been saying this for months on my radio shows and my broadcasts, as we go deeper into the 2020 election cycle, and people get excited from this candidate, that candidate, this candidate has a good catchphrase, that candidate has a viral video. The most important thing for African Americans to do is to put together a comprehensive African American agenda, a comprehensive African American agenda. And this is an agenda. This gives you standards. It deals with issues that pertain to the African American community and policies attached to those issues. And this gives you a standard to measure the various candidates by, Democratic candidates, independents, and Republicans. Because as far as I'm concerned, we should not hold Democrats to a standard we're not going to hold Republicans to. This is why I have an issue with people who say, well, no reparations, no vote. Really? The reason why is because what standard are you holding Donald Trump and Republicans to? What standard are you holding Senator Mitch McConnell to? You say reparations, you say no reparations, no vote, then basically you're saying you want Donald Trump for another 4 years and Senator Mitch McConnell for another 6 years. Senate Majority Leader in the U.S. Senate, who's already said basically, who they've already said that H.R. 40 is dead on arrival in the U.S. Senate. Why? Because Senator Mitch McConnell determines, as Senate Majority Leader, he determines which bills get debated on in the U.S. Senate and which bills get voted on in the U.S. Senate. They've already said that's dead on arrival. Even if it passes the House of Representatives, which is the lower chamber, it's dead on arrival in the U.S. Senate. That's why Mitch McConnell must be voted out of office in 2020. Senator from Kentucky, he must be voted out of office in 2020. This is the same Mitch McConnell who blocked Merrick Garland, who was President Obama's Supreme Court nominee, left that seat vacant for a year. This is an example of how elections have consequences. This is what I'm trying to explain to people. This is why we don't even understand what took place during 2020. You got to go back and watch some other presentations where I break down what happened in the 2020 election and the rapid voter suppression that took place, and how there were 868 fewer polling places in the 2016 election that nobody wants to talk about, because Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act of the 1965 Voting Rights Act was struck down by the U.S. Supreme Court case of Shelby County versus Holder. And we don't see the connection between that being struck down in 2013, rapid voter suppression in 2016, and African-American turnout dropping 7%, while everybody else's turnout went up in 2016. The African-American turnout in the 2016 election was the lowest in 20 years. It dropped from 66.6% in 2016 in 2012 66.6% voter turnout. It dropped down to 59.6%. People just want to chalk that up to voter apathy. That wasn't all voter apathy. That was rampant voter suppression. 14 new states had new voter ID laws, and you had African Americans being targeted by Russian intervention. And we're not making the direct correlation between the two of them. People just want to say, oh, it's voter apathy. No, it wasn't. It was rampant voter suppression. See, we don't want to talk about how the interstate cross-checking system knocked 1.1 million people off the voter rolls. Greg Palast has talked about this, who put out the documentary, The Best Democracy Money Can Buy. And Joanne Reed has talked about this on AM Joy on MSNBC. We don't want to make the connection between the two of them. The State of Black America from the National Urban League digs deep into this, and they dig deep into the Russian intervention in the 2016 election and how Russians specifically targeted African Americans with a disinformation campaign. And they deal with the role that voter suppression played also. Voter suppression from Republicans played in the lower voter turnout of African Americans. And Trump won Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania by only 78,000 votes. Trump won the three battleground states, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, by 78,000 votes. And Trump's former campaign chair, Paul Manafort, turned over 75 pages of polling data to Russian oligarch Konstantin Kilimnik. We still can't figure out why. What was that about? And he's discussing polling in battleground states with Konstantin Kilimnik, Russian oligarch. But Trump says no collusion. Okay. No conspiracy. Yeah, right. Okay. All right. Yeah, you have to read the Mueller report. This is you got to read the Mueller report. Okay, because this is deep. There were 140 contacts between this Trump campaign and Russians, but it was just all a coincidence. Okay. All right. Let's continue here. How's everybody doing? Okay, so here's Dr. Leonard Jeffries. I just saw him at the Improper conference here in Detroit. Improper conference on reparations. And we're going to wrap up here in a couple of minutes. Here's Dr. Leonard Jeffries, one of my teachers, who teaches us whoever controls the images controls your self-esteem, self-respect, and self-development. Whoever controls the history controls the vision. He's absolutely correct. It's Professor Kabahai Watha Khamenei. We deal with the origins of the word America. We deal with the Africa, problem with slave movies. Bantu Stephen Biko, one of our great South African freedom fighters. He taught us that the most potent weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. The most potent weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. So we must take our minds back. So these are the Moors heads on the national flag of Corsica, which is a French island in the Mediterranean, and national flag of Sardinia as well. So we deal with who the Moors are. Christopher Columbus. What's important to study, to understand about Columbus, is Columbus never came to the land we call the United States of America. He goes into Central America, South America. He goes in the Caribbean. The land we call the United States of America, Columbus never came to. The closest he came to this land is Cuba, which is 90 miles away. And I still hear people say, oh, Columbus discovered America. Really? Now, about 70% of the people Columbus encountered on his 4 voyages were African people. This is what Dr. David Imhotep talks about in The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence. This is why this book is so crucial. This is why we reference this book in the online course. Okay. About 70% of the people Columbus encountered on his 4 voyages were African people, because we were already in those areas. Yes, the transatlantic slave trade took place. Yes, the Spanish are taking Africans into those areas in the early 1500s. That's true. Yes, you have the Asiento de Negros of 1517, signed into law by King Charles V. Okay. Yes, that happens. But African people were already in a lot of those areas also. So this is why the chronology of history is so important. We deal with Right Reverend Bishop Bartholomew de las Casas, who, what he, some of the most important Europeans when it comes to understanding the transatlantic slave trade are Christopher Columbus, probably Prince Henry the Navigator of Portugal, and Bartholomew de las Casas, who was a bishop who traveled with Columbus on some of his voyages and wrote books about, where he wrote at least 2 books. Tears of the Indies was one of them, because I read his books in college, and they weren't reading material for a class. I was reading them on my own. Okay. And this is one of the things I learned about Wayne State University's library, right? The Purdy Kresge Library at Wayne State University. This is where I got a lot of the books from. They had books by Dr. Joseph Ben Yakinen and Dr. John Henrik Clark in the library at the college, but a lot of people didn't know it. Even a lot of African-centered people on the college campus didn't know it. I went to the library and checked these books out. And I remember one time it was on either 2nd or 3rd floor of the library. And I needed a librarian to help me find the books, right? So it was a white librarian. And she just she just took me to the books and said, here they are. And just, if you need anything else, let me know. And I'm sitting there amazed. I'm like, I was waiting on the Ku Klux Klan to jump out and attack me. I was waiting on Bull Connor to jump out with the dogs and the water hoses. None of that stuff happened. It's just like, here it is. So sometimes, we find ourselves trying to pick the lock to a door that's not locked in the first place. Sometimes we find ourselves trying to pick the lock to a door that's not locked in the first place. There were no obstacles in the way. And our tuition paid for those books. But a lot of us didn't know a lot of that, because I was speaking and writing when I was on campus at Wayne State. A lot of us didn't know those books were in the library. It was a secret. It was a secret, right? We knew where the Student Center building was. We knew how to play spades, but we didn't know those books dealing with our history were in the library on Wayne State's campus. Okay, so all right, let's see here. Let's wrap this up. Okay, so these are just a few of the things we deal with in the online course. We deal with Ghana, Songhai, Mali. We deal with, I added in we deal with the Black Panther movie, some of that as well, and how it relates to African history. We deal with Hannibal Barca and the Battle of Cannae 216 BC. I mean, there's a lot that we deal with. Okay, Dr. Malefi Kete Asante, life insurance companies, all this stuff. Okay, the father of modern gynecology, Dr. J. Marion Sims, who was a butcher. Okay, who did horrific experiments on African women, enslaved African women without anesthesia. Okay, so you can register for this online course. Visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Okay, it's right on the home page of our website. It's there, and you can go back and watch. We have 36 hours of bonus content. You can go back and watch the classes over and over again. And we have a live chat in the classes, so you can ask questions, during the class also. And, and I know sometimes people can't make the class live, so that's fine. Go back and watch it over and over again. And you can watch from around the world also. Okay. Also, if you like this type of information, you donate to the African History Network, paypal.me/the AHN show, paypal.me /the AHN show, or click on the yellow donate button at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. All of my DVD lectures are there at our website. But one of my latest presentations deals with the real history of Juneteenth. Okay, the real history of Juneteenth, and actually I have 3 presentations here that I just did. We have Ancient Africans in America Before Native Americans, Columbus, or Slavery from Kemet to Wakanda. We have this 3-hour presentation I just did, June 11th, Juneteenth History, Emancipation Day, but not Independence Day. We never got our 40 acres and a mule. Dr. King's Poor People's Campaign, We're Coming to Get Our Check. That's a 3-hour presentation. And also Black Migration, 1619 to 2019, The Birth of a Nation, Red Summer 1919, The Great Migration, and Detroit Race Riot in 1943. But we have about 42, 43 of my presentations at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Okay. All right. So how'd you all like this type of information? What's the price of the class? Oh, okay. So the full course is $80. Dwayne asked. It's $80, regularly $130. It's an 8-session, 16-hour online course. So you can go back and watch it over and over again if you miss anything. Watch from around the world. As soon as you register, there's about 36 hours of bonus content that you can watch also. We'll post a link again. So we'll be in class 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tonight. As soon as you register, you can watch session 1. Okay. And let me see. How was the DVD? Which DVD are you referring to? Somebody asked a question. How's the DVD? Which DVD are you referring to? Those DVDs are $10 each. Okay. In case you're asking, let's see, on YouTube, Jerome. Okay, we got Jerome, Marlene. Story of the black man and woman life trying to pick the doors that's not locked. We are the key to everything, and don't forget it, brothers and sisters, said Nicodemus.